welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. We're taping the program this week a little bit earlier. It's Thursday, October 25th, and the reason for the change is this weekend will be taken up by the United Front Against Austerity, the launch, the initial conference, for some the founding convention, for some a public assembly, but it will be a very interesting meeting. United Front Against Austerity. Now, by the time you hear this, your main option is to proceed to tarpley.net and get the info about where it's being webcast. There will be a webcast, and there will be an audio broadcast, I believe, on No Lies Radio. But check all of that. Look at my Twitter feed. There, Twitter feed will get you the most up-to-date stuff, and I'll try to do some tweets during the conference. And above all, tarpley.net, right? Tarpley.net would be your headquarters. If you cannot attend, as is likely, but of course, if you're hearing this in the afternoon of Saturday and you're anywhere in the New York area, right, do drop by. This will start at about noon. It is in the INN World Report Auditorium. The INN World Report Auditorium on Walker Street, 56 Walker Street, New York, 10013. It's 1.5 blocks south of Canal Street, between Church and Broadway. So, starts at noon. Get there early. A contribution is sincerely recommended. Let me give you the rundown of the speakers here. Let's see if I can get an updated list. Maybe I'll give you the speakers in the second segment because it's going to take me a minute. The list is changing rapidly. We've got some important additions that need to come in. But the idea then is that we're going to have this United Front Against Austerity. It's going to be, I think, a monumental turning point event. So try, if there's any way you can, if you can be there or if you can tune in. Now, this is one side of what we need to deal with today. We'll devote probably the first hour to that. The second hour I want to give you, since this is the last full week before the presidential election, I want to give you the final summary of the case against Mitt Romney. Now, we have two books out on Obama. We have Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate. Really uncanny how that one tells you exactly what's going to happen in Obama's current term in office. With Color Revolutions, a whole big chapter about color revolutions. And, of course, that's been the hallmark of the entire thing. What went on in Egypt, what went on in Tunisia, what was attempted in Iran, and so forth. These are color revolutions. So that, I think, called it. And we've got Barack H. Obama, the unauthorized biography. You get those from Progressive Press of California. But now we have this mysterious candidate whose ruling passion is secrecy. His election program, his intentions for his term in office, are as secret as the inside of a Mormon temple for the rest of us Gentiles, damned Americans, and unbelievers. So it's a secret religion. I guess you can call it a mystery religion. He would be the first non-Christian president of the United States. And I'm just appalled. I look at these people like Billy Graham who claim to represent Christianity. What's clear to me is these people don't give a damn about Christianity. They're into power and money. And when, of course, you look at Ralph Reed, it's even more obvious. So they're willing to support somebody who's not a Christian, and they're not even willing to point out, or to explain, to justify, to motivate to their own gull-duped, pathetic followers, the so-called Christian evangelicals and social conservatives, value voters, that yes, he is not a Christian, but there are good reasons. They won't even do that. They're just trying to finesse the issue. Well, it's time to tell the entire story, and fortunately, I have. And that is just too weird. Bishop Romney and the Mormon takeover of America, polygamy, theocracy, and subversion. And now, I think for the first time, I've got some printed copies here. I've got one in my hand, which I think is a very handsome and effective book. It's about 280 pages almost, a little bit less, 275 to 280. Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. And here you get the real tradition of Romney, right? He says, I love my faith. Well, what is your faith? Oh, it's a secret. Well, you can't keep a secret in today's world. And based on, 182 years of Mormon history, we can give you a pretty good idea. And as I'll try to motivate in the second part, when you see Romney's ability to lie, to prevaricate, his mendacity, his etch-a-sketch, his evasions, his distortions, his complete disregard for truth, you are dealing with lying raised to a theological principle. And I've tried to talk about this in the book under the heading of antinomianism, that Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, Mitt Romney, the great trio now, we've got three of them, the triumvirate of Mormonism, they obviously believe that as saints, and not just as saints, but as saints living in the end time, because of course it's always 5 minutes to midnight for these characters, they have the right to violate the moral law, right? 10 Commandments doesn't make any difference. You can lie, you can bear false witness, as you're probably commanded to. So this is now the Mormon moment, and if you don't know what the White Horse Prophecy is, if you don't know what the Oath of Obedience is, if you don't know what the Oath of Vengeance is, you're buying a pig in a poke, and you better not do that. So you better get your copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. For this, you need to go to progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com, and what you find there is you can buy the printed copy, which I highly recommend. It's a handsome book. I think it's an interesting addition to any personal library. But if that takes too long or too expensive, fine. We have a $6 offer on an ebook. So $6, I think, puts it within the reach of the broadest masses. So rather than spend time reading the Voter's Guide of the League of Women Voters, you should get yourself a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. And, of course, Halloween is upon us, right? So we should remember that the entire Twilight saga, this cycle, the trilogy, I guess it is, or tetralogy of trashy novels about, what can we call it, a woman practicing abstinence, but surrounded by an aristocratic vampire and a somewhat more down-to-earth or even, what can we say, more populist werewolf. This woman is a Mormon, and according to some articles that I've read, I must confess I'm not really a student of the Twilight saga, but according to some students of her work, that is an allegory of Mormonism. So watch out, and these are subtle ways in which this will be projected. And wait till you have Romney in the White House, and he wants to go to the Mormon Temple, which is located up here on Georgia Avenue, a little bit off Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside the Beltway. As I've said before, it towers over the Beltway. When you're driving west on the Beltway after Georgia Avenue, you see this immense structure looming. It seems like it's looming right over the Beltway. And that's the Mormon Temple. And when Romney goes there on Sunday, nobody can go with him. It's a secret. And what did you do at Temple today, Bishop? It's a secret. Well, if you want that kind of a presidency, that's where we're headed. So time to do something about it. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, we're urging you to do two things. The first is to buy a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Get it from progressivepress.com. That's Progressive Press of California out there in Palm Desert, California. Get a paper copy. You can get a ebook version of this for as little as $6. Secondly, now tune in and inform yourself, because it will all be up on the internet, right? If you're hearing this on Sunday or Monday of the week before the election, then go to the Against Austerity UFAA website, and you will very soon get there the entire proceedings of the UFAA conference, again being held in Lower Manhattan on Saturday, the 27th of October from noon to 6 at the INN World Auditorium, INN World Report Auditorium, 56 Walker Street. So these are now the two things. Now, let's situate the UFAA conference before we go through the speakers and some of the topics. The thesis of this conference, right, the reason it's important to have the conference is because of the looming austerity offensive. Let me read you some language that I proposed for the program of the conference. The United Front Against Austerity seeks to defend the American people in the worsening world economic depression, and it is worsening, right? We're getting all these earnings reports about how bad the corporations are now doing. We're getting rumblings of some kind of a world bond panic. We seek to defend the American people in the worsening world economic depression against demands for a grand bargain of savage austerity cuts emanating from Wall Street and about to be implemented by the Congress during the November-December lame duck session in an atmosphere of hysteria about the so-called fiscal cliff. We hope, we the United Front, pardon me, we the United Front Against Austerity, hope to advance programmatic, class-based demands for the 99% against the 1% that will add up to an economic recovery. Important point. We also propose to link up isolated struggles into a common mass-based campaign to break the political monopoly of Wall Street. Our aim is to go beyond mere protest towards contending for political power. Protest is for wimps. Revolutionaries seek to take power. Now, this is very relevant. This is extremely timely. We pick up the Washington Post of this morning, Thursday, October 25th, 2012. Obama vows to refocus on debt. Now, just a little bit of background on an article like this. You may remember, if you're a regular listener to the program, that Obama let the cat out of the bag for the Washington Post editorial board in the week before his inauguration, between about the 13th and the 20th of January last time around, right, in 2009. Right before he got inaugurated, Obama went through what his real intentions were for the Washington Post editorial board. And he said, it's fixing Social Security. He said, that's easy to fix Social Security, meaning to gut it, to gouge it, to chisel it, to rip off the American people, to deny them, strip them of their economic rights. And then he said, then there's Medicare, which is even harder, because then you've got to, well, you understand, right? You've got to have people being deprived of life as well as other benefits in order to make the bottom line work, of course. So Obama has this habit of telling the Washington Post what he really wants to do. I don't know if he tells anybody else. Well, maybe he tells the Des Moines Register. We'll see that here in a minute. Obama vows to refocus on debt, points to agenda for second term. President says he'll pursue the grand bargain. Well, that's not a secret. I've been pounding on that since the convention and before. In his convention speech, Obama said he was eager for a grand bargain with these worse reactionary, fascistoid Republicans. So Obama has been criticized that he has no vision for a potential second term. Oh, he has vision. It's called genocidal austerity, his version. Now he wants to come out with greater specificity, including a pledge to solve the nation's intractable budget problems within the first 6 months. That is bone-crushing, killer austerity coming at you. In an interview made public Wednesday with the Des Moines Register, Obama said he would pursue a grand bargain with Republicans to tame the national debt and would quickly follow up with a push to overhaul the nation's immigration laws. The Washington Post says that Obama's focusing on two issues: the debt, which has now soared past $16 trillion, and immigration legislation. Notice the lack of attention to the main problem of the world economic depression, which is unemployment. Only by creating productive jobs and beginning production do we get out of a depression, dear Obama. And the austerity psychosis route does not work. It was tried in Germany between 1930 and 1932, and we know what happened in 1933. We don't want to retrace those steps. So here we go. Obama recorded this austerity tirade on a couple of days ago for the Des Moines Register. He wants to get their endorsement. And first he wanted the interview to be off the record, and then the Des Moines Register started complaining. So in this interview, Obama appears as a political pundit, gaming out timetables and calculations for his dealings with Capitol Hill Republicans. And he has, if Romney loses, then the racist, xenophobic, anti-foreigner, Hispanic-hating wing of the Republicans will be forced to moderate their incendiary rhetoric because the Republicans have alienated the Latino community, the fastest-growing demographic group in the country. Okay, so you get the idea. But now, the rationale for voting for Obama. He does have this brochure. I have not seen the brochure, but we have some quotes from the brochure in this article. This is called The New Economic Patriotism, a plan for jobs and middle-class security. And, of course, it's not that. It's a plan for genocidal, brutal, savage, bone-crushing austerity cuts. So at the top of the priority list, a promise to forge a bipartisan compromise. Bipartisan. Let's extend the hand of bipartisanship to outright fascists. That's great. So that's at the top of Obama's list. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Remember two things. Buy a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney, and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Buy it now from progressivepress.com. Paper copies, ebook available for as little as $6. And then pay attention. Go or follow on the Internet or view it on I think there's going to be a dedicated YouTube channel. Get the entire rundown on the proceedings of the United Front Against Austerity, which is being held in New York City, noon to 6 on Saturday, the 27th of October at the INN World Report Auditorium, 56 Walker Street, downtown near Canal Street. Now back to this article, which confirms the entire rationale for this conference, confirmed overwhelmingly in spades. Thursday, October 25th, Washington Post. At the top of Obama's second-term priority list, a promise to forge a bipartisan compromise, he never learns, that reduces rampant government borrowing and makes long-postponed decisions about taxes and spending. I want to hear about jobs, Obama. In the interview, Obama called the budget deal one of the best things we can do for the economy. So here's what he says. We're going to be in a position, says Obama, where I believe in the first 6 months we are going to solve that big piece of business. It will probably be messy. It won't be pleasant. We know it will be, for many people, it will be deadly. But I am absolutely confident that we can get what is the equivalent of the grand bargain that essentially I've been offering to the Republicans for a very long time, which is $2.50 worth of cuts for every dollar in taxes and work to reduce the cost of our health care programs. Now, think of what this means. He never learns. He's still obsessed with this bipartisan sellout, because this is, of course, what his masters in Wall Street are telling him to do. He's making his bid. Again, as I said after the convention, Obama's offer is, Wall Street, I'll get you a 15% cut in the U.S. standard of living. Romney claims he can do more, but Romney generates overhead costs through things like general strikes and possible civil war with Romney's cuts and with Romney's personality carrying them out, and a team of grinning Mormons as austerity enforcers. In the case with Obama, of course, he wants to do it under left cover. So it's going to be messy and unpleasant, but it's going to be the grand bargain. He already gives away everything. He's never learned how to negotiate, right? His notion of negotiating was not to start with the Medicare for all demand and then see if he were pulled away from it. But he gave that up, and he not only gave up the Medicare for all, he gave up the so-called public option, whatever that was, and therefore we ended up with the Republican plan. So Obama is the deliverer of the Republican plan. He's the Eisenhower wing of the Democratic Party without the many benefits of Eisenhower. So $2.50 of cuts for every dollar in taxes. Obama is intellectually capitulating. He is so weak, so cowardly, so corrupt, so much of a puppet that he's going to do $2.50 in cuts for every dollar in taxes. Now, the problem for Obama, of course, is we saw the Republican primaries. Every Republican presidential candidate rejected a 10-to-1 ratio of killer cuts compared to token cosmetic tax increases on the super rich. Again, they won't notice them. Their luxuries will be unabated. But at the other end, the necessities of the poor and the little amenities of the middle class will be savagely cut. So he's going to go for cuts, and he's going to work to reduce the cost of our health care programs. Now, that is where we get to what I'm afraid there's no other way to say it, to the death panels and everything that goes with it. That is clearly implicit. So we've got the January deadline with $500 billion in automatic tax hikes and spending cuts. Obama says about this, there's going to be a forcing mechanism to deal with what is the central ideological argument in Washington right now, and that is, how much government do we have and how do we pay for it? That's not the argument at all, Obama. The argument is, between you and Romney, is who can gouge, chisel, and exploit and loot the American people, and what percentage of the existing standard of living is going to be fed into the maw, the rapacious and capacious maw of Wall Street in the process. So the Republicans are not impressed. They want to disregard Obama. They think he's on his way out. Obviously, if Obama's defeated, you can reckon with even worse capitulation if he feels that he's got nothing to defend. So we've got some Democrats and independent budget analysts. I'm sure Alice Rivlin is happy, and other austerity ghouls getting ready for Halloween. Some Democrats and independent budget analysts were cheered by the new urgency Obama appears to place on the issue. Chris Van Hollen, Congressman, austerity Democrat here in the Maryland suburbs, senior Democrat on the House Budget Committee, is delighted. Well, I'm sorry, Chris. If you make these attacks on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, you will destroy the only basis of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party right now is more and more a confederation of these identity politics subgroups, each one with very, very narrow or even single-issue demands. The only thing that holds them together is the fact that between 2/3, 3/4, or 4/5 of the American people are determined to maintain their rights under the New Deal, the New Frontier, and the Great Society. If the Democratic Party starts attacking that bedrock, it will fly apart in a million directions. It's the only way you get out voters. You don't get voters with your identity politics. You get voters based on the idea that they want to maintain their economic rights. Once it's clear that that's not going to work, then bye-bye Democratic Party, right? We're now in a situation where either party could collapse, and Obama seems to be doing his best to collapse the Democratic Party, because if the Democrats somehow manage to get this through this election, as we'll talk about a little bit later on, the Republicans are headed towards demographic subordination as time goes on, right? Their old white male electorate will get them nowhere compared to Latinos and other growing groups, or even just young people of any type. Now, some Democrats were far less enthusiastic. Obama's pledge to push again for a grand bargain creates an uncomfortable dynamic for the campaign's final days, with liberal groups mobilizing to help turn out his voters while simultaneously planning a full-fledged national campaign after Election Day to oppose the kind of budget deal the president has long sought. This is precisely the atmosphere into which the United Front Against Austerity is indispensable and will intervene. Now, the AFL-CIO plans to keep its elaborate network of full-time organizers and union activists in place around the country after the election to pressure lawmakers in both parties, as well as the Obama White House, to steer clear of cuts in Medicare and Social Security, according to people familiar with the plans. The same day Obama made his comments to the Iowa newspaper, AFL-CIO Richard Trumka, a big supporter of Obama, published an op-ed in Politico blasting the notion of a grand bargain as, quote, lower tax rates for rich people, paid for by benefit cuts for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. All right, Rich, we're waiting for the call for the general strike. We want the general strike, Rich. We want effective measures. Get out there and fight, Rich. Prove to us that you're not essentially blackmailed by some witness protection program, okay? We're waiting for you, Rich. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So there's the picture. Isn't this really amazing? Is Obama throwing the election? I don't know. If you come out with this killer cut austerity plan and pledge before the election, you are going to demoralize your own backers, and that's the contradiction that the Washington Post points to. People who are mobilizing for Obama for the election, and then they're going to turn around and have to mobilize against him, against his sellouts, against his stab in the back, his deceptions, his dissembling, and everything that we've always talked about on this program, going back to those two books, Obama, the Postmodern Coup, and Barack H. Obama, the Unauthorized Biography. So Trumka says that the grand bargain means lower taxes for rich people paid for by benefit cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which is true. That's fine. We want to know from Trumka about the general strike, and we want to know whatever happened to the demand, which the AFL-CIO has approved, which they approve in theory, the Wall Street sales tax, what they call financial transaction tax. And their version is minuscule. We want a full-blooded, robust Wall Street sales tax of 1% at the very, very least. So we've also got Bernie Sanders, usefully, has expressed his concerns to the White House that Obama is avoiding firm promises to protect entitlement programs. Sanders says, unlike 4 years ago, the president has not been outspoken in saying that he's not going to cut Social Security. And to flesh this out a little bit more, here we have The Hill, right? Interesting specialty publication. On the 24th of October, yesterday, labor unions, liberal groups fear lame duck betrayal by Obama. Quite right. Major labor unions and dozens of liberal groups working to elect President Obama are worried that he could betray them in the lame duck session by agreeing to deal a cut in safety net programs. While Obama is relying on labor unions and other organizations on the left to turn out Democratic voters in the battleground states, some of his allies have lingering concerns about whether he will stand by them if elected. Yes, that's very much to the point. The AFL, the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Campaign for America's Future, the members of the Strengthened Social Security Coalition, and dozens of other groups are involved. And Sanders here says you can have virtually all of the senior groups, you can have the unions, you can have some of the veterans groups as well coming on board to fight against it. And then one of the Republican fascist tricks is called the chained CPI, Consumer Price Index, a way to gouge the Social Security cost of living escalator, which is already a joke. Sanders, I think you're going to have a whole lot of people beginning to stand together and say, sorry, at a time when the wealthiest are doing phenomenally well and so many people are hurting terribly because of this recession. It's a depression, Bernie. You are not going to balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick, the poor, and disabled veterans. And again, it's time to escalate this stuff. And the United Front Against Austerity is calling for serious struggle tactics on this, general strike, and have a program and put on the agenda, right? Change the national conversation, as they said in the days of Occupy. Let's change the national conversation and then go beyond it. We want to talk about the Wall Street sales tax, and then we want to have Congress pass it under the gun of a general strike. Get together and pass it in one day, because the entire thing is shut down, and it's not going to start again until you pass that bill. This is now the situation. So since all of these things are so, this is really why, this is the reason why we have the United Front Against Austerity. Major labor unions, it's good that they come into this awareness, but then again, what are they going to do? And one of the goals is obviously to box in the crats, the scissor bills, the labor skates, and force them to do things that they don't want to do. The AFL-CIO has planned a series of coordinated events around the country on November 8th, 2 days after Election Day, to pressure lawmakers not to sign on to any deficit reduction deal that cuts Medicare and Social Security benefits by raising the Medicare eligibility age or changing the formula used for Social Security cost of living adjustments. That's fine, but we need something broader. We need something that says no cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and no cuts in unemployment benefits. As a matter of fact, what we need is open-ended unemployment benefits. Who should pay? Wall Street pays, using the Wall Street sales tax. Make the Wall Street parasites pay. Make the 1% pay. Don't think you're going to get anywhere harassing them on their way to work, that you're going to yell slogans at them and make them feel bad and offended. They don't care. Hit them in the labanza. Hit them in the pocketbook. Make them pay for the economic recovery. All right, so that's my take. Now, concerning the United Front Against Austerity, I will have up on tarpley.net, by the time you hear this, I will have posted a contribution that I'm making to the pre-conference discussion of the United Front Against Austerity, right? Circulating some policy statements. So this is the one that I have come up with, and it's called Political Report to the United Front Against Austerity Conference, New York City, October 27th, 2012. And you will get the rundown there. But now let's just go through some of the things that will be prominent in this conference, okay? I've read you the sort of preamble of this. Conference is divided into two parts. First of all, we're going to have reports and proposals on the worldwide fight against austerity. This is in the nature of reports. These are short speeches, typically 10 minutes or so each. Opening remarks by Bruce Marshall, the moderator of the first session. He's a former congressional candidate of the Green Party of Vermont. He's also the former party chairman of the Green Party of Vermont. Followed by Amelia Boynton Robinson. Mrs. Robinson is a legendary leader of the civil rights movement. She's part of the Tuskegee, Alabama community over many years. She was, of course, present on the Edmund Pettus Bridge during the police riots and attacks on civil rights agitators. She's now in advanced years. I think she's approaching 100 years old. A person of massive moral authority and devoted her entire life to these values. So we're honored to have Mrs. Robinson as our leadoff speaker. Followed then by Cindy Sheehan, anti-war activist, former congressional candidate. She was for a time the vice presidential candidate along with Roseanne Barr. I'm not sure the status on that one, but she remains and has been since 2005 one of the main leaders of the anti-war movement here in the United States and, of course, internationally as well. Then Glenn Ford will be sending in a videotaped contribution. Glenn Ford is an eminent political commentator from the Black Agenda Report. He's the conscience of a whole area of opinion, black and white, and all other kinds. Fearless analyst, and absolutely, I think one of the leading political thinkers in the United States today. So we'll be back in just a second. We've got a bunch of other speakers to go through, and then some of the topics. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington. Now it's our last full week before the presidential election. We will have one further program, which will be taped in the first couple of days of November, which will be on the radio the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Election Day. But this is the last full week before that. So we're going to pay attention to Romney here in the second section. And, of course, the way you can do that is to get yourself a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Buy it now from Progressive Press, progressivepress.com. Paper copy, looks great. I think a very handsome edition. Great job by John Leonard out there at Progressive Press. And an ebook copy available for as little as $6, which puts it within the reach of the broadest masses. So that's number one. Secondly, the United Front Against Austerity, to be held in Manhattan on Saturday, October 27th. And who are the speakers? Well, just going through the program. Part one, reports and proposals on the worldwide fight against austerity. This is starting about noon, Saturday, October 27th. Opening remarks by Bruce Marshall, former congressional candidate, Green Party of Vermont, and former chairman of the Green Party of Vermont. Amelia Boynton Robinson, legendary and beloved civil rights leader. Cindy Sheehan, eminent anti-war activist. Glenn Ford, one of the finest political commentators in the United States from the Black Agenda Report. Reverend Edward Pinckney. This is the leader of the resistance in Benton Harbor, Michigan. He'll be reporting to us by telephone, I believe, from the site, from the ground. Reverend Pinckney is leading the resistance in Benton Harbor to the emergency manager, the austerity dictator that has been sent in by Governor Snyder of Michigan under the infamous emergency manager law. And the good news, let me break in here with good news, that the forces gathering signatures in Michigan have succeeded in getting onto the Michigan state ballot, statewide proposal A and B. And you've got to vote. If you're in Michigan, you've got to make sure you vote. Forget about the presidential election. That's Hobson's choice. But vote for A and B. Vote yes for the two proposals, A and B, on the Michigan state ballot. The first one is that there should be a referendum on Governor Snyder's oppressive, un-American, and odious law allowing him to name emergency managers, little dictators, that he sends into places like Benton Harbor, Flint, Pontiac, Ecorse, the Detroit school system. He blackmails Detroit that he's going to do it there. It's got to end. So that opens then a referendum. Now, referendum you can win because the Democratic Party is not in the way on a referendum, right? You compare Wisconsin, they got Walker recalled, but then they had to turn to the Democratic Party. They got this hack politician, Milwaukee Mayor Barrett, who wouldn't even talk about workers' rights, so they lost. Well, the Democratic Party betrayed them. That's how they lost. In Ohio, by contrast, it turned into a referendum on the Kasich fascist union-busting policies, and there, working people won. So in Michigan, working people can win. But in order for that to happen, A and B is to affirm a right to organize, that there is a right to organize in Michigan, labor unions. So that's the kind of struggle that Reverend Edward Pinckney is helping to lead out in Michigan. So we're honored to be hearing from him. Next comes yours truly, Tarpley, and I'll just give a quick summary of some of the things that I'll put in that longer political report. Dr. W. Randy Short, media commentator for Press TV, member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, one of the leaders of the civil rights community here in the Washington, Baltimore area. Danette Chavis is a nationally known activist against police brutality. We've got to pay more attention to the questions of mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex, and therefore the idea that we have a slave labor economy, a concentration camp economy, if you will, going on. And one of the leading edges of that is this police brutality question. Don DeBar, founder of Community Progressive Radio. He was with WBAI New York. I had the honor of speaking on the same program with him in New York City at the Stop NATO in Syria event last month, I guess in September. So we'll be delighted to have Don. He's written a book about the events in Libya. Professor Anthony Montero, African American Studies, Temple University, Philadelphia. Dr. Yanis Varoufakis, political economist and part of the leadership of Syriza of Greece. Syriza, the coalition of Greece, and Varoufakis is one of the authoritative spokesmen for that. And this, of course, is absolutely critical for us because Syriza is, to some degree, the model for what we're trying to do here. And the word is that Syriza is gaining. Polls from Greece in the last week or so indicate that if the Greek election were held, as it's almost inevitable by springtime, Syriza will become the government, and that will be a critical moment. Do we have anybody here in the United States who is qualified to come forward as an ally of Syriza? Well, we better get busy on that. Then we have Eric Draitser, independent journalist. Now, one of the most capable observers, critics of imperialist policy. His website, stopimperialism.com, with articles, with important interviews that you have to keep up with. A new voice in this realm of critique of U.S. foreign policy. Now, we also have, we were going to have Eric Lerner. Eric Lerner, a writer on science. He's actually a cosmologist. Occupy Wall Street activist. He was part of the demands group of Occupy Wall Street. He is interested in the question of jobs for all, job creation, the tradition of the WPA and the PWA. And I understand Eric Lerner, unfortunately, can't make it. But one of his associates, Dr. Jay Arena, professor of sociology, College of Staten Island, City University of New York, I hope will be able to illustrate some of the same ideas. Then another old friend, Stephen Lenman, research associate, Center for Research on Globalization. People know his radio programs. I've been on them several times. Professor Murrell Brooks, professor of political science at Virginia Wesleyan College. We've got a video contribution from David Swanson, veteran activist, peace movement, and Occupy here at Freedom Plaza, activist, blogger, and author. Conclusions then, the last speech actually is from Tom Kiley, INN World Report. He's got his own radio program. I've been on it several times. You can find those on my website, tarpley.net, and that'll lead you back to back to Tom's programs. He is going to talk about the New Deal heritage, Franklin D. Roosevelt's Economic Bill of Rights, and the lessons for today. And then some brief conclusions from Bruce Marshall. In the second half, this is now a debate. This is a debate format. This is open mic. This is a microphone, a line of people. You wait on the line. You get to the microphone. You've got 5 minutes. It's kind of like the House of Representatives, what they do in their morning business, right? 5-minute statement, and you can once you've done it, you can go to the end of the line and come back again. As long, everybody who wants to speak stands on the line. So now we're going to have Eric Draitser as the moderator, and I'll give you the rundown on the proposed themes. Now, these are proposed themes, but we'll get to them now in the next segment. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. 2 burning issues. Buy yourself a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Get it now from Progressive Press. Paper edition looks great in my eyes, and you can get an ebook for as little as $6. ProgressivePress.com, ProgressivePress.com. And while you're there, take a look at these interesting books by George Seldes, Facts and Fascism. Highly interesting. I'd get some background on these reactionaries that we have to deal with all the time. So we're talking about the second part of the program here for Saturday afternoon, October 27th. Chair is Eric Draitser. Again, stopimperialism.com. We have some proposed planks for discussion. Now, this is for discussion, and I'm sure there'll be other planks, and maybe there won't be some of these, but that's the idea. Let's talk about the American people being sick of war and interested in economic recovery. End the Afghan war at once. Bring all troops home from all combat zones. Draw down foreign bases. End drone attacks, renditions, black site prisons, kill lists, and assassinations. We're told that Obama, Brennan, and Donilon are trying to institutionalize the killing, make the world into a killing field. Repeal the NDAA, right, a police state measure. Repudiate Obama's suspension of habeas corpus, right? The NDAA says they can jail you anytime, and Obama says he can kill you anytime. Hands off Syria and Iran. Hands off. No intervention. No more color revolutions and meddling in other nations. Stop meddling in Moscow and other places. Convert the military-industrial complex to civilian production, mass transit, fast rail, energy production, and the space program. That's the big winner. Secondly, democracy and anti-police state demands, anti-totalitarian demands. End police brutality and repression. End violence against the black, Hispanic, labor, and protest communities. Stop mass incarceration of black men and others. End the slave labor system of the prison industrial complex. End the war on drugs against the American people. Instead, shut down the CIA, which runs drugs, and Wall Street, which launders the money. Then we have the question, what's the leading agitational demand? What's the signature demand of United Front Against Austerity? And we should debate this, because this will lead to extremely interesting exchange. Should the signature demand of the United Front Against Austerity be the 1% Wall Street sales tax on financial turnover, or the restoration of the Glass-Steagall Act, or the institution of a wealth tax, or some other demand? Now, all of these demands can be entertained. Glass-Steagall is a fine thing. I will argue that it needs to be the 1% Wall Street sales tax, since this is a very direct demand. It's not really a process demand. Glass-Steagall is a process demand. It doesn't relate. You can't say, I'm out on strike, and then you're asked, who's going to pay for the wage increase if you're a government worker? You can say, all right, Wall Street will pay. How? Wall Street sales tax. Glass-Steagall doesn't quite get it, although I include Glass-Steagall absolutely. It's an indispensable element of program, but it's not the leading edge of agitation. Similarly with the wealth tax, which doesn't really get you that much money and opens you up to some tremendous demagogy by the fascistoids that we know are always lurking. Now let's talk about some other agitational proposals. The basic anti-austerity demand is this: no cuts in wages, No cuts in the social safety net or other benefits. No cuts in public services. No layoffs, no firings. No tax increases on working people. Hey, Obama, read that one. Student loan amnesty or moratorium and payment freeze. Different ways to stop payment on $1 trillion in oppressive debt, which is not, it's stopping the progress of human life for the younger generation. It's also interfering in defense, as Panetta has been telling us. Stop foreclosures on primary residence. In other words, we want a federal law to freeze, halt, stop foreclosures on primary residences. This would be the new Fraser-Lemke law. Get a payment plan approved by a judge anywhere, anytime, any level. You stay in your primary residence. Then, Medicare for all, universal quality single-payer health care. Then, if you're crushed by debt, let's go back to the world pre-Volcker. We want a 10% interest rate ceiling on all debt, any kind of an interest-bearing note, any kind. 10% is max. And if it goes over 10%, take your business elsewhere. Get out of the United States. 10% interest rate ceiling or national anti-usury law. Unlimited unemployment benefits for 99er relief. Unemployment benefits do not lapse. They don't end at 26, 52, 99, or any other. They go on and on until you find a job. And we're going to be forcing the ruling class to produce the jobs. Also, we probably want to have a discussion on minimum wage or living wage and what that would look like. Other policy discussions proposed for job creation. How can 30 million new productive jobs be created? Here's an interesting issue. Should it be done as part of the federal budget? This would be Krugman, right? Krugman says just use the Keynesian approach, put it on the federal budget, or, my proposal, by seizing and nationalizing the Federal Reserve System to issue cheap credit for infrastructure and recovery. And I'm going to argue for the Federal Reserve seizure and nationalization, because this is the engine of credit that ultimately can be used for the entire historical future. Whereas if you do it on the federal budget, you do eventually get to the point that Hamilton talked about, right? Alexander Hamilton says that funded public debt can be an advantage provided it's not exorbitant. So where does it become exorbitant? Let's not go down that road. Let's make the Federal Reserve, the national bank, provide the credit. Now, United Front interventions. Immediate projects would be support the Benton Harbor struggle and the Michigan struggles in general by means of a worldwide mobilization in favor of the statewide proposals A, which is referendum against the Snyder Emergency Manager Law, and B, the right to collective bargaining on the Michigan ballot November 6th election. We want to support the anti-Bain capital struggle at Sensata Technologies in Freeport, Illinois. We want to support the Walmart strike. We want to provide propaganda and leadership against the grand bargain of austerity during the November-December lame duck session of Congress. I would also add the international dimension. That would be the Peugeot struggle, which is the attempt by Hollande to shut down Peugeot auto plants all across the Paris region. And we're just told that Ford in Britain is closing some plants with 1,500 jobs destroyed. They're moving the factory to Turkey. All of these things have got to be fought. And finally then, practical question, how can we institutionalize United Front cooperation and operations over the coming months? So those are some proposed topics. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So two burning issues of our time. Get yourself a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Get it now from Progressive Press of California. Go to progressivepress.com. And paper copy, I think a very handsome edition, wonderful work by John Leonard. And then the ebook, a mere $6. It's the price of a magazine. You can pay $6 for certain newspapers. So you can pay that. It's a one Starbucks, right? It's a 20. Now, the other thing, of course, Saturday, October 27th, United Front Against Austerity. I've given you the overview. Check tarpley.net for all details. Tarpley.net will also give you my political report to the UFAA conference. And we've just been hearing, if you look at today's Washington Post of Thursday, October 25th, it's all confirmed. Obama is planning to sell you out. It's really reckless what he does, but he's telling you that he wants to stab you in the back after appealing to you for your vote against the Wall Street asset stripper Romney. He's going to turn around and do Wall Street's work under his it's somewhat frayed, but still some left cover or something like this. Now let's look at Romney. I guess we're not going to have as much time as I'd hoped for this. We got two segments, so let's do what we can, and then we'll probably devote the next program entirely to the rundown against Romney. A couple of strategic considerations, first of all. As you hear, we are not advocating, I'm not advocating any kind of lesser evil. I am saying against Obama, against Romney, United Front Against Austerity. That's my vehicle. However, we also have to consider some other things. Let's talk about divided government. If Romney wins, he is likely, given these dynamics, to carry with him not just the House, but the Senate. We would then be back to one-party rule, and that is a nightmare. The last time we had Republican one-party rule was at the beginning of the Bush administration, and the result was, 9/11, the Afghan War, and the Iraq War. They all go back to the period of Mad Dog Bush and the Republicans controlling both houses. You must vote in such a way as to preserve divided government. That, I think, is a reasonable policy goal. Do you want a regime of Romney, Boner, and McConnell? That doesn't look too good, and I think that's worth avoiding. The other question is the party realignment. Obviously, Karl Rove wants to have a 40-year permanent Republican majority. He wants to have a permanent austerity dictatorship. We've gone through how that would work. It would work on voter suppression. It would work on voter ID. It would work on closing the polls. It would work on denying the early voting and other absentee ballots. It would work through massive purges of names from the electoral rolls, harassment of voters, and so forth. It also works through the Citizens United decision with the massive influx of dirty money from oligarchs. And, of course, the Supreme Court, if Romney can get in now, he'll name one or two Supreme Court justices. They will be reactionaries, and then we will be locked into a trajectory towards fascist dictatorship through the Republican Party, although with the, obviously, security apparatus looming larger and larger. It's much harder to do the fascist austerity dictatorship through the Democratic Party because, again, it does have this character of an extremely diffuse confederation of these identity politics agitational groups. So the Republican attempt is to seize control of the federal government now because they feel that 4 years from now, and inevitably as time goes on, they will get weaker and weaker demographically because their white male voter is in decline compared to Hispanic voters and quite a few others. So if they don't grab power now, they may never get another chance. So what we're really talking about is a theme that I've addressed in the past, which is the question of the party realignment in the Electoral College, right? You'll remember we have these cycles in American history. We had the New Deal cycle from 1932 to 1968. That was dominated by the New Deal Democratic Party. This is the best government that we've had, of course, with monstrous exceptions like Harry Truman. We had Wall Street Democrats sneaking in there, too. But it came to more or less to fruition under Eisenhower. That led us to what most people would call the good old days. Don't forget it was full of racism. But still, for many right-wingers, they look back to Eisenhower. Well, that's the New Deal under Republican administration. Since then, though, we've had the Republican dominance, right, through the Southern strategy, 1968 to, well, until now, right, 2008. If Obama stays in office, it will be then a 40-year Republican cycle from 1968 to 2008, dominated again by the racist Southern strategy, right, with reactionary predominance, and the big exception being Clinton in the middle of it. If we had a realignment of the Electoral College in favor of the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party, I think at that point, given these demographic trends, would tend to dwindle to a regional party of racists and reactionaries concentrated in the southern states. If the Republican Party were to atrophy as a national party, we could then get what we're really talking about in this program, which is a split of the Democratic Party between the Wall Street wing, people like Obama and Schumer and others, and then leftists. Some of these are also unsavory characters. But when you hear Bernie Sanders, when you hear DeFazio, when you hear Marcy Kaptur, that's different. It's not adequate, but it is different, and that could be the basis of a split. So it seems to me that the more desirable of these outcomes is that the Republicans dwindle to what they really are, this racist regional party. The Democrats then split into the Wall Street Democrats, led by people like Obama, Kerry, and the current minority of the Democratic Party, which is the ones that have some relation to the New Deal. Obviously, not a good situation. Don't blame me. I told you ways to avoid it in useful time repeatedly. One way to get out of this was don't put Obama in as the Democratic candidate in 2008. I wrote 2 books to try to stop that, and it didn't work. But don't blame me. Blame others. So there we have this. Now, the problem with Romney, unfortunately, one of the effects of the pathetic weakness of Obama, right? You saw Obama in the first debate. That's the real Obama. Cowardly, evasive, refuses to fight. Obama has also refused to make an issue of this Mormon question, because this is a huge thing. Here we have a religious organization, which is actually a political faction. And what are their hallmarks? Well, contempt of women as reflected through polygamy, right? Reducing women to subordination and despair. This is simply devastating and destructive for modern society. The consequences for the individual are horrendous for the individual woman. But remember, the barometer of the treatment of women is one of the ways you can judge the progress of a society. So what it means is a monstrous degradation of the entire society. We can't have this. If you put Romney in the White House, you will have not just Colorado City, Arizona, and Hilldale, Utah, but the poligs out there in the Great Basin are going to go wild because nobody will interfere with them, right? We know Orrin Hatch, Senator Lee, others, Michael Levitt, they're all willing to tolerate polygamy. And they're getting help from people like Turley here at George Washington University, who take a libertarian approach to polygamy. They're kind of like John Stuart Mill, the British East India Company. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now let's just start the process which I will then devote the entire next program to. The program that comes on the Saturday before the presidential election will be the summary of the contents of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. And this is designed to spur you on to buy your own copy. Get it from Progressive Press, progressivepress.com. Paper copy, I think, looks great, and ebook as little as $6. Let's just go through here. The preface. We have a quote from E.J. Dionne, a right-winger friend of his, called him after the 47% rant by Romney to a bunch of rich moneybags. After this was published, the friend of E.J. Dionne of the Washington Post called him up and said, "If I were you, I'd wonder why Romney hates America so much." Hates America so much. Hates the American people, I would say. This is not what you want for the presidency. And my proposal is one factor, and an important one, is the traditional Mormon narrative of persecution, resentment, and revenge. And remember, we're talking about something that was not a peripheral aspect. It was not in some dusty book, but it was an integral, salient part of the liturgy, this divine service, right? The temple endowment, as they call it. What we call in Christianity the liturgy, they call outside of Christianity the endowment, right? It's a Freemasonic concept. You get the idea. But the Mormon oath of vengeance against the United States, imposed by Brigham Young in the mid-1840s, after the killing of Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith, which is, the killing is still, I think, to some degree mysterious, because he was in the middle of running for president in 1844. He wanted to, obviously, he was being used or wanted himself to block the presidency of Henry Clay. This was one of the last chances to avoid the Civil War. If Henry Clay had been elected president in 1844, Henry Clay is literally Mr. American System. That's his platform. The American system, meaning a national bank, meaning internal improvements paid for by the federal government. And it doesn't matter whether they're only in one state, if they're of national interest. And then the protective tariff to promote industrialization. So obviously, Joseph Smith in 1844, with his bombastic declarations, he created the Council of 50 to seize political power. He was made king of the kingdom of God. His megalomania was in the ascendant. But somebody apparently decided that he wouldn't be allowed to play this out. Anyway, that's the prologue to what Brigham Young then did. Once Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith had been killed, Brigham Young comes along and says, I'm inserting into the liturgy of the Mormon Church, every time you go to the temple, you're going to recite the oath of vengeance, which is, I promise to exact revenge from the United States of America and the American people for the death of the prophets, Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith. That was repeated in every liturgy in every Mormon temple until the late 1920s, meaning that George Romney, our affable governor of Michigan, I remember once seeing him. American Motors used to be the sponsor of Disneyland, and he would come out with the new models and show you these glistening cars in the Disneyland showroom there. So he, George Romney, the governor of Michigan, who ran for president in 1968, would have recited the oath of vengeance against the United States repeatedly until it was finally phased out in the late 1920s as part of what they call the good neighbor policy. The good neighbor policy is that the Mormons would de-emphasize their hostility and hatred against the United States because it was obviously hurting them. So we want to know about that. And if George Romney swore it, he also swore that he would teach it to his progeny down to the fourth generation. Well, if it starts from George, I don't know whether we count George or not. If we count George, it's George, Mitt, Tag, and Tag's children are all sworn to the oath of vengeance. If George doesn't count, then it starts with Mitt, Tag, the kids, and their kids have all sworn, are all bound by the oath of vengeance sworn by George Romney. Do you want such a person in the White House? The narrative of persecution and revenge. And, of course, the idea that you could have blood revenge, human sacrifice is what it means. Human sacrifice is demanded by Brigham Young. He builds that into the liturgy as well. It's called blood atonement. The terrible things done by the American people to Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith cannot be forgiven by God unless the people involved are killed with bloodshed. That's the doctrine. So if they say polygamy is part of religious freedom, the answer is no. But if you accept that polygamy is part of religious freedom, then the next one is human sacrifice is part of religious freedom. And it's not theoretical. This is a demand from Brigham Young, blood atonement and the oath of vengeance against the United States. So Dinesh D'Souza, who just got caught with a paramour in a hotel room and has lost his job at King's College, you can see that when you get into this Mormon orbit, the marriage institution, it comes under tremendous stress. Dinesh D'Souza has argued in his film 2016, you got to look at Obama's father, anti-imperialism, and all the terrible things that go with this. So I'm the poor man's 2016. I'm telling you just too weird what Romney would do. So I've done Obama. I've told you everything about Obama that's relevant. I'm taking you back to Parley Pratt, one of the co-founders of Mormonism, along with Joseph Smith, back in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s. Time magazine, in their profile, called Romney a typical Mormon pragmatist. Well, pragmatist, what it means is what you've seen now: liar, prevaricator, etch-a-sketch, flip-flop. So again, you don't know what you're getting, but with my book, you do know what you're getting. You're getting the Mormon tradition, and believe me, it's ugly. Anti-woman, it's anti-black racism. You could not be a full-fledged member of the church if you were black from the time that this popped into Joseph Smith's head. Sometime between 1830 and 1840, the door was closed. It remained closed until 1978. So all the people who have joined, the families that have traditionally been part of the church, joined something that was a Jim Crow white supremacist religion. And if you want to know where those ideas come from in the Intermountain West, you don't have to look very far. Now, the unique feature of my book, in addition to giving you the panorama of what Brigham Young did to secede from the United States and start America's first civil war in 1857 to 1858. This is, of course, the incident where the President of the United States, James Buchanan, bad guy, but still, here it is, the first time an American president talks about terrorism is James Buchanan warning of a strange system of terrorism which has grown up in the Utah Territory under the theocratic dictatorship of Brigham Young. So this is the Mormon Rebellion in Utah Territory, 1857 to 1858, including the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which is part of the glue that holds the Romney campaign together. Every principle in the campaign is implicated. But the unique feature of my book is that it shows the entire thing is promoted and made possible by the British East India Company, the British Foreign Office, as shown through figures like John Stuart Mill, supporting Mormonism and on liberty, Thomas Carlyle's unpublished essay in favor of the Mormons, and other top British oligarchs. It's parallel to synthetic religions in China with the Taiping Rebellion, in the British creation of what is called Hinduism, and indeed the Wahhabite and Salafi tendencies in the Middle East. All of these are fostered by British intelligence, at that time located in the British East India Company. So that's my unique contribution, I would say. So we'll go through all this in detail next week. See you then. World Crisis Radio. We'll be back next week.